AUIS and a fellow at AUIS, and he is one of our jewels and gems at the university and for Iraq. And so I'm going to let him start this panel. And just to let everyone know as a heads up, we are going to go straight through today and then have a later lunch. So we will have all of the panels and then followed by lunch around 2:30. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 panels and then lunch. So thank you all.
Good morning to you. And Christine, thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. I don't know if I can actually live up to even the smallest one of them, but we'll try. I think, thank you all for coming this morning. And I think we have, what I've seen always the case in whenever we discuss Iraq and the reconstruction of Iraq or the rebuilding of Iraq, the financial sector is always the last one talked about, and especially the capital markets and their role in the country as either a vehicle for savings or a vehicle for raising capital is never an issue or never addressed, always a side issue. So it's wonderful to start today and discuss this with all of you. Now today we have 3 wonderful people, but they also represent 3 sides of the coin that makes an exchange or a equity market possible. First of all, we have the institutional investors represented by my colleague Grant, one of the first and one of the, if not, and the largest to invest in Iraq, and they've been here since 2010, if I understand. And they've been invested in Iraq, investing in the future of Iraq, not only their clients' money, but their own money. And I think this shows the level of commitment and interest in Iraq. And also we have the head of the stock exchange, I think, in my personal experience, one of the most outstanding people in our industry, and who has done a lot to promote the capital markets of Iraq, but also who sits at the heart of what can be the issues and challenges in the country. And also, finally, last but not least, my colleague Shwan, who is an expat, an Iraqi, and he came back to Iraq almost the same way as Grant did investing in Iraq, but they invested more directly in coming back, an expat coming back, reinvesting, joining the brokerage industry, and right now one of the most important voices in a way for anybody who wants to understand Iraq on the financial side. Arabi Securities are always the ones who publish information, publish research, and enable people like our work to make it possible. So I think these 3 gentlemen will have a lot to say today. We're not going to have, let's say, a few minute speeches, but we'll all discuss the issues that we all have in a way in Iraq and the challenges. Personally, on my side, as the way we all look at Iraq or all frontier markets, Iraq has enormous challenges. I think yesterday we discussed them in a private sector roundtable and other places, and we all know all the challenges that the country has. And I think, in a sense, while there might be political challenges, I think for the financial side, challenges can be more like opportunities, because basically the scale of the challenge gives you a sense of potentially what's called the arbitrage opportunity, in the sense that the challenges are quite here, the opportunities are so large, yet the assets or the opportunity is priced at the risk side. So there's always opportunity for that. And for us, we make our money when the challenges become easier and so forth. And that's where we are. So I would like to start today with the first thing is a question to ask Grant in terms of, as an investor in Iraq, as somebody who spent a large amount of time and effort and money in visiting companies and so forth, what is, in your opinion, what is needed for the market to grow? What is needed for international capital to come to Iraq? What are, a few points there.
Sure. Before I answer, I'd like to thank AUIS and AUIS for organizing this. And this panel in particular, I think, is key to everything we heard yesterday. We all understand the state payroll is too bloated, that the private sector in Iraq needs to grow. But we haven't talked about really how to do that. And so I hope in this panel we can talk about how do we get to a point where the private sector in Iraq can thrive on its own without state assistance, without state directives. So let's work toward that. Iraq's central challenge, in my view, is capital formation and capital creation. In most emerging markets where I've invested in emerging markets for the last 20 years. You have a system whereby the country exports, and there's export revenues come in, and then those get recycled in the local economy, invested in the local stock market. Companies can go to the stock market and list, issue shares, raise capital, and there's a multiplier effect so that $1 of export earnings isn't just $1 of spending. That leads to $4, $5, $6 over the course of the investment cycle. In Iraq, what you have is you've got a lot of export revenue from oil, but those are being sent into the local economy and they're just spent. There's no multiplier. And so what we want is that Iraq develops a self-sustaining capital cycle. And how do you do that? There are two ways to create capital. One is through credit, that's banks issuing credit. And the other, which we'll talk about, we can talk about that later, but the one we can talk about here is through a stock market, through a domestic stock market and domestic capital markets. And I'm shocked that we're talking, you hear officials and the entire discussion of Iraq is about how do we grow the economy, grow the private sector, but there's no discussion of how do we develop a domestic capital market. And that's the ISX, that's the Iraq Stock Exchange. I mean, this may not be a popular thing to say, but the answer, in my view, is not, and through domestic capital market, you bring in foreign investment, you create a capital cycle. The answer is not conferences like in Kuwait, top-down conferences where you direct people, you will invest in this. The answer is to let the market grow as an organic entity. People can come in and invest in what they choose. Businesses can choose if they want to list or not. And there's no government directives, there's no interference, and it grows on its own. Yesterday, Dr. Barham made the point that Europe fought 2 world wars, and then, but they still were able to grow, and the UK laid all the railroads and the canals. He didn't mention that every mile of railroad in the UK was funded through a local equity issuance. And the same in the US. Every railroad was initially a listed entity. And it's not just Victorian history. In China today, the toll roads are listed companies. In Thailand, in Pakistan, you have ports that are listed. So what they do is they go to the exchange, they list this, they say, we're going to build a port. Who wants in? And then you get a key shareholder like the World Bank or IFC will say, all right, I'll give half. And then you get local investors to come in and say, all right, here, I'd like to subscribe for shares, because then with that capital, you'll build the port, you'll have a stock that trades on the exchange. Once the port is operational, then you will be paid dividends from the earnings of the port. That's how it works. That's how this gets done. We know the beauty of or the saving grace of what's going on in Iraq right now is that these problems are not intractable. They're very human, and they can be solved through things that have been done before, examples throughout history that we know how this works. So that's
one side of it, but I think what you mentioned is very crucial, because as you said, it's none of these projects started by fear. None of them started by a government decision. They've all started because the government role is more like the provider of guaranteed of contracts, the guarantee of exchange and security. The private sector takes over in the sense of if the project makes sense, it gets funding. The funding comes in from an international supporter like the IFC or from state organizations that support half the project. But if the viability of it comes from the project itself, and investors do make it possible, and an exchange becomes a vehicle whereby people can either exit their investments or enter a new investment. So absolutely, I think the issues you raised, and go, yeah.
Well, and this has been done. Before I did Iraq, I was involved in the Russian market, in the post-Soviet Russian market. And there wasn't a Russian stock market in 1993. And there is today, and it went from 0 to, as of this morning, the market cap of Russia is $611 billion. And that's capital creation that's there. And those companies can go to the exchange and raise money as they want. New companies can come to the exchange. And there's now an ecosystem in Russia that works. And so I think Iraq really needs to focus on supporting the ISX.
Okay, now so we hear one side of the equation. Now we go to the dice, or as El said, this is Sataha. you sit on the bit whereby, one, you have the demand coming in from listed companies. Let's start again. You sit on the center of where half the disputes are, in a sense, or the challenges. On the one hand, you have the demand of the investors for X, Y, and Z. You have the companies, but also you have the challenges. I think one of the ones that everybody from the outside world has been asking for, and you've done a lot of work on, is the custody bank and the challenges you have for that. So your views on some of that, and also, what do you want to say on that?
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. This is the first time that be in this university. And many of you, I didn't see it before, maybe few of you, sorry. We met in Baghdad or in conferences outside Iraq, which is, I believe, the stock exchange have many challenges, especially in Iraq. We are talking about many items in one area. The items we are talking about, not financial systems only, we are talking about banking system, economy system, everything regarding the stock exchange. The stock exchange in every country have building capacity, which is not only trading system or depository system, which is I have in the stock exchange from NASDAQ OMAX, which is #1 in the world. The regulation that we have, we made it those 10 years ago, is depending to the trading. But when we see the product that we have in the stock exchange, it's only shares for Iraqi companies. We have one item trading in the stock exchange, which is shares for Iraqi companies. Till now, we don't have many regulations that help us to encourage investors, to tracking investors, to come to invest in Iraq economy, in Iraq a product, in Iraq stock exchange, which is in the end of the day, we are talking about a small area that we are looking for a huge area that we want to do in Iraq economy. One of our challenges is the custody. We mentioned that, we discussed that yesterday. The custody is a services that global banks and Iraqi banks help each other to guarantee or to convince the foreigners or the Iraqis who is living outside Iraq to invest in the stock exchange. Let me give you the simple picture for the stock exchange. We have trading done by brokers, by traders, which is they are controlled or monitored by the stock exchange. And we have the depository, which is just like a bank. All the shares are deposited in the depository, and there is many function, many regulation, rules and regulation to protect the investors and the shareholders' rights in the depository. The custody, it's outside partner, which is monitoring and pledge all the shares that the investors ask them not to sell it, not to buy it, to buy another shares unless you get order by SWIFT from me or by other method. Till now, we don't have any custody working in Iraq, and maybe someone asked why we don't have custody. We have many good relationships with foreign banks, Citibanks, Standard Charters, JP Morgan, begun of them in the beginning was HSBC. Why we don't have custody? Are they don't trust Iraq economy? Are they don't trust Iraq stock exchange? Or what is the matter? First of all, let me say that the Iraqi banks don't have expert with these services. Absolutely. So we didn't see any Iraqi bank have the courage or insist to have the services with Iraq stock exchange because they don't have knowledge. The simple area that we are facing in Iraq, especially for the Iraqi investors, that the knowledge is not enough to create more services. I remember someone from the shareholders, when I asked him, before we done the automation, all the physical certificates, it will be drawn and will be in the system. He says, I will not give you my certificate. Because my certificate, I put it under my bed and sleep in the night because it is my fortune. I says, yes, all your fortune will be deposited in the depository and you will have receipt and you can ask by mobile or by phone or whatever, you can give orders. Grant, you don't come every session to the stock exchange. You just give your orders regarding the tip ticker that you see, the prices that, and the information that you get online, and you give your order. Is that right, or I'm kidding? That's right. That's right.
I'd like to be there every session.
I understand that very well. We like to have you also. But in the end of the day, we didn't see any courage from Iraqi's bank, which is the local banks. It must have local bank, have a relationship with the globals to save or to guarantee or to courage or to make convince that the foreigners, I can tell them in their mind that your shares or your securities, not only shares, are safe in the depository. No one can do anything with it. No one can make anything. We are controlled. We are watching. We are tracking everything, every single minute in the daily work. Such as, or in the end of the day now, the depository, the CSD now, it's working as a custody. In fact, we are now working as a custody because there's no third party.
Yeah.
I believe the global banks, it is very huge responsibility that they must convince that they must help Iraq Stock Exchange in that area. It is not big services. It's just like we said yesterday. It not will cost them many huge cost, but they are looking for other area in the Iraq economy, exporting oil.
True.
Oil and gas. You know yesterday in the session, we didn't talk more than oil and gas and electricity.
That's the only
oil
thing
and
that's
gas
always
and
discussed.
electricity.
Yeah.
No one looked to the Iraqi economy as a whole picture. We are looking just for the oil. We are looking just for the gas. No one looked in the other areas. In fact, finance sector, banking sector are part of the economy, not only the oil. The oil, yes, we are depending 90 or 85% to the oil, but you cannot build a country or a society or an economy without looking to the whole picture. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Taha. I think it's a wonderful idea, and there's some points, we'll come to it later. But when I, as an Iraqi, but when I set up our fund, the first things when I started to learn about Iraq, you search and search, and you find research on Iraq, and you find Rabi Securities. And I looked into the background of the company, and I that's one of my questions coming in. As an expat, as somebody who's had a successful career outside Iraq, Shwan, you came into Iraq as an investor, you gave up all that interest, you gave up as an investor, you bought a company on the stock exchange, you started writing research on them, and I think one of the crucial things that you made possible, I think, for foreign investors is your association with Ober Grayson, who enabled people to actually almost seamlessly enter into Iraq. It is easy, by the way, getting to Iraq, but you made it actually more seamless and easier. But what are the challenges? I mean, it's been, 12, 15, 13 years since you first decided to make that wonderful decision. What are the challenges? What are the state officials?
So let me talk about that decision, because I was working for a very wise man before, and one day, in a eureka moment, I went to him and said, I quit. And he said, why do you want to quit? I said, because I want to go back to my own country and do what I'm doing here, because I think there is a lot of potential there. This was end of 2007. And he looked at me and he said, Shwan, a potential could remain a potential for a very long time, and you have a short life. That man was George Soros. And now I know why he took $5,000 and made it into $40 billion. So the decision, the jury's still out on that decision, whether it was the right decision to make or the wrong decision to make. But I felt that my country needs my services. in what I know how to do, which is capital formation, stock market, bringing investments in. And we spend the first 3 years in the firm really just writing research and advertising Iraq abroad. I took probably 20 trips internationally from Singapore to South America to the US, talking to investors and encouraging my colleagues from my life before to come to Iraq. This, of course, was done without asking one dime from the government. This is completely private sector. Between the years of 2009 and 2014, we were able to bring into the country in excess of $700 million into the stock exchange. We listed 2 companies on the stock exchange. In 2013, we were actually in the region, Rabia Securities was #1 investment bank before Goldman Sachs. Nobody knows that. We don't advertise that. We don't come out and say we can do this, we can do that. But now we're reaching a point where we need to tell the government the importance of the stock exchange, the importance of capital markets. We need the government we don't need money. Okay? We just need them to do the regulation, to believe in us. Right? There is absolutely zero belief in the private sector, whatever lip service is given to it. Mm-hmm. On my phone, I carry one quote, okay? And I'll read it now, which is very relevant. Some regard private enterprise as if it were a predatory tiger to be shot. Others look upon it as a cow they can milk. Only a handful see it for what it really is, the strong horse that pulls the whole cart. I didn't write this. It's Winston Churchill after World War II. Now, unfortunately, our government see the private sector as a tiger that needs to be milked or a cow that needs to be shot. So I could write books about the mistakes that were committed, and what needs to be done. I could actually advise other governments what not to do now, just by looking and criticizing my own government. It is really very, very basic, very, very basic. We have to form businesses. These businesses, many ideas are a dime a dozen. You talk to anyone, he tells you, from the government or outside the government, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to build this. And then you ask, okay, who's going to finance this? And there, everything stops.
Yeah.
Right? And I tell everyone, you cannot think of it as a body. You cannot have all the muscles, all the organs, everything, without blood, and think that this thing could move. We are the blood of the society, and we are completely ignored. There's another problem we have, and I challenge this to the government. I haven't met anybody in the bureaucracy or in the executive branch that actually started a business under his own name without having a backing of a party, a political party, or a wasta, and made it a very, very successful business. Right? So, let's put it aside, okay, all this nice talk. There are low-hanging fruits. Please listen to us. I'm very thankful for AUIS for pushing this session to the second day in the beginning, because usually when we discuss
finance, the last
session before everybody has left, and basically we're just talking to ourselves, and there's absolutely no one from the government listening to us. And to be very frank, I don't care about what you say about politics. This is the most important part of Iraq. If we're going to start moving Iraq forward, it's going to start here, not there.
Go ahead, Grant.
If I can mention, so what's the scale that we're talking about? So in the last 10 years, Saudi Arabia has issued $39 billion of new equity, new stock on their exchange. And that's companies that went to the Tadawal, listed, local investors, foreign investors, whatever. That's $39 billion of new capital created and inbound investment into Saudi Arabia the last 10 years. South Africa, 36 billion, Nigeria, 11 billion, right? And the beauty of that is it's all without, the government needs to do nothing. That just happens. Once you get the system in place, like I said, it's an organic animal, and it just does what it wants to do. If there's investor appetite, they will come. And in my experience, having done this now since 2010, the companies that we own in Iraq are run by the best management teams I've ever met. And they've learned how to make money in the most challenging operating environment you can imagine. And not just make money, but exceed on a global scale. One of our investments is a company called Baghdad Soft Drinks, which is the Pepsi franchise for central and southern Iraq. And they're growing earnings and sales 20% a year consistently. Even ISIS, you wouldn't know it happened. The oil price crash, you wouldn't know it happened. It's just like a step change. And their margins are the best in the world among any bottler, right? And so this is an Iraqi company that trades at a third or a quarter of the valuation it would command if it were listed anywhere but Baghdad.
Yes.
But if you bring in the foreign investors, if you bring in a custodian that foreign investors can trust to hold their shares, they will come every week. I get a call, I tell you this all the time. Every week, I get a call from a fund outside Iraq saying how it looks so amazing. How do I get involved? And then when they get to the custody question, the conversation stops. So you want millions of dollars to come in short order? That's how you do it.
We get calls practically on a daily basis from international funds, including my alma mater. I used to work for a company called Templeton, which actually manages now close to $1 trillion globally. $1 trillion globally. Right? And I used to be responsible for the Middle East investments. I talk to my colleagues now, and they say, Shwan, we have money. We have. The little guy, 24-year-old, has $3 billion under him to invest in markets like Iraq. He said, but I cannot go to my bosses because you don't have custody. It's such a simple issue. It doesn't need committees and governments and presidents. And it's services. Well, we don't have it. Of course, when you discuss this, no one really thinks about it and thinks the enormity of what we're talking about. The other problem I have, it's a blessing in disguise, that no one in the government understands what a stock market is. So I can give you another short story. When I moved we decided to open offices in Erbil and Sulaimani because a lot of companies are in Erbil and Sulaimani. And because the foreign investors couldn't go to Baghdad at the time, and they could come to Sulaimani or Erbil, and we bring the company from Baghdad or wherever it is. And when I opened, they said, in Erbil, you need a license from the Ministry of Finance because you say Maliya. I was quite wet behind the ears, a young guy, went with all my enthusiasm, went to the Ministry of Finance, sat in front of the minister. He said, oh, so what do you do? I said, well, we look at companies. Are you accountants? You go to the accounting. No, I'm not an accountant. I hire accountants, but I'm not. Are you a lawyer? No, we're not lawyers. But we hire lawyers. We advise companies. So what do you mean you advise companies? I said, well, companies come. They need to restructure their capital, so they come to us and we advise them. He says, they pay you for that? I said, well, if we're lucky, they will pay us for that. And he said, I don't believe you. I don't know how you're going to make money. So leave the application here. We have a branch in Erbil still working. We have never gotten a license from the finance ministry. By the way, 10 years on, I'm one of the advisors to the finance ministry. So in Erbil, and they have come a long way since then. But so what I'm saying is a blessing in disguise.
It is.
Because we did all this, without the government knowing anything. If they knew, they will hamper it. But now we reached a point we're too big. We need to get bigger. Once you get bigger, you have to have their blessing.
which is
and we can't get it.
which sort of brings me to okay, Sata.
Since Grant and Shwan, by the way, you did it only one time,
Which one?
having the license
Yeah.
from the ministry?
Yeah. One time.
Okay, which is good.
Yes.
Uh,
I have other stories with the minister.
We've
Not
got
all
only
the
15
story in
minutes, so we
one-
can
one
stop
time.
somewhere.
When we opened the stock exchange to the foreigners, we insist at that time. By the way, the stock exchange is self-regulatory organization, and it is non-profit organization also. So we are not government body. When we made the regulation for the foreigners to trade in the stock exchange, we didn't put any other condition that we asked the Iraqis to do, which is all the Iraqis and the foreigners can trade in the same stocks. They can trade in the same
Which is a very important thing, by the way,
listed
for
companies.
local
They can, in the same period, same clearing and settlements. All the operation that the Iraqis and the benefits that Iraqis have, same things to the foreigners. There is no other conditions. Unless we ask the foreigners, we will not accept any cash. We will not accept any, even the foreigner, if he came to Baghdad and invest, he will not pay cash. It must coming from or through banks, foreigner banks or Iraqis banks, to the settlement banks. This is the only condition that we make for the foreigners. That's mean when we made the automation in 2009, when we made the depository, when we opened to the foreigners, we put in our mind that we are not local stock exchange. We are part of the world. We are part of the economy. We are part, not the Iraqi economy, only the world economy. So all we ask, every conference, every meeting with the government, every discussion, every committee, we ask only one question. As a stock exchange, our demand is to be standardization. When we are working in committee with the Iraqi Securities Commissions, which is supervise the stock exchange and the listed companies and the brokers, all we ask, our item that we insist to have, we are matching the standardization, because we are part of the Arab Federation, we are part of the FIAS Federation, we are working to be part of the World Federation, and in the end of the day, we are opening the stock exchange just like other stock exchange in the area or in the region to the others. We can trade. Our mission that to make the trading not only for the stock, for the whole securities, to list more companies, to be part with the privatization if it's coming. Let me not call it a privatization, let me call it corporation. When we made other step in the economy to push it to be part of the Arab economy or the world economy, we have the same steps. 10 minutes? It's for him, not for me. We
We'll
are
take 10
part
more.
of the world. We are not singing alone in another room. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Head Simon says 10 minutes, which I think each of us has 10 minutes to go, right? Or overall 10 minutes. Overall 10 minutes. So I'll be brief, but I think there's something that Grant touched on which is very, very important. I mean, we mentioned the challenges to the exchange and challenges we all face, but I think the lifeline or the lifeblood of the exchange is companies. We have a number of companies. We have some world-class companies. We have some poor companies, but we need new companies on the exchange. They can come in only two ways, either privatizations of existing state entities, or they come in through companies that use the exchange to raise weight in a sense of the excess employees they have, because there's some business that's worth it. And the young companies have the initial startup. So if we can, within 10 minutes, I mean, starting with you, Grant, and then Fahan.
No, you're exactly right. Iraq is blessed with an enormous amount of enormous number of private, family-owned and state-owned, or private family-owned businesses, and then state-owned businesses that would be very attractive to investors. So one example is Trade Bank of Iraq, TBI. Every emerging market has a parastatal bank on its exchange that is typically the darling of the exchange. In Russia, it's Sberbank. which is still controlled by the government, but it's listed on the exchange so investors can buy and sell it. And what Iraq could do, or think about doing, is take Trade Bank of Iraq as the most dynamic state bank and the healthiest state bank. Just list 10% of it. So you'll overwhelmingly control it. 10% of it, give Iraqi citizens preference to buy 5% of that allocation, or half the allocation, and open the rest to foreigners. If you do that, I guarantee you, if Trade Bank of Iraq shows up on the screens of any institutional money manager in London, New York, they will want to be a part of that. To be owning a state bank in an oil-based economy the size of Iraq at the start of the oil cycle, oil production cycle, that's something you want to own. So that's a state side. We're not going to privatize the oil and gas. That would never be done. That's Iraq's patrimony. But the banks are fertile ground for privatization, and then the family businesses.
Yes.
We all know Iraq has a wealth of family businesses that are very well managed. That could also be privatized.
We get requests all the time. I mean, I got one this morning. I got one request this morning from private companies that want to list. But of course, you know, we can do it. We have the investors, we have the local investors, we have the international investors, but we need to have these few building blocks to actually be successful in it. Iraq today has, by all counts, between $30 and $60 billion under the mattress. This is money wasted. This is money that's not working. This is money that will really solve many, many problems if it goes into the system. We have a pension fund today in Iraq that has excess of $10 billion, I think. This is a bankrupt pension fund because if you do the actuarial studies on it, it will be bankrupt in years to come, but it will be a problem of the next government, the next generation. So it's not going to be the problem of this government. So nobody looks at it. And when you go tell them, you are not making money, why don't you put some money in the stock market? It is your companies. It is your banks. Stock market is gambling. We're not, we have to have safe investments. So that mentality really has to change. But as I said in the beginning of my discussion, we are the horse that pulls the whole cart. So we are pulling, and I think I'm beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Many times I see this light and it's a train approaching. But this time I'm hoping that it is, it's not.
Okay. Satah, do you want to say something, or shall I open the floor for 5 minutes of questions?
I don't have something to add it, but the process of every stock exchange, we know the steps from the beginning to the end. Development, it's not happen only in the stock exchange, it must be happen before in the economy itself.
Absolutely.
So we heard that a grant asking to have privatize the 10%, putting 5 and 5. In the end of the day, there is many sectors have to be done. But I am asking the government not to do it under the companies law, go to the capital market law, which is do it IPO. Because at the end of the day, all of our problems as foreign investors, brokers, Iraqis are going to done by the standardization, which is we are not going to discover the wheel. I mentioned that yesterday. The wheel already exists. Yes. We are going to use it only. Thank you.
Well, I think we have under 5 minutes, 3 minutes. 4, and we're going to sort of I'll bid her 5, so you can have 5 minutes. Anybody would like a question to ask? Go ahead. Yes. Yeah.
One of the sponsors. Thank you. Thank you very much. I am part of the company who's sponsoring this event, but I am a retail trader, and I'm really interested in the subject. Kakshan have raised some very nice points. However, all the panel here needs to, like Kakshan said, that there is not the right education for people to invest. And this is a very great vehicle to push the Iraqi economy forward. But whose job is it to educate the people, to get the mentality of gambling out of them and raise the trust of the stock market? Thank you.
It's really everybody's job. Right? So to move a society from government-based employment, the government is always right. We all work for the government, whether we like it or not. To, they are the kings and the rulers, and we are the servants, to a society where a man does what he has to do to earn a living and be happy with it, is really everybody's job, right? It's not only the government, it's not only the stock market, it's everybody's. And it's really a change of mentality, and that will take years and years. But we could start somewhere. I mean, if we just, so we could start, the government could start privatizing enterprises, the government could actually get out of the banking system.
Also a pension fund.
A pension fund could start investing. When the pension fund invests, people get encouraged that their pension is there, so they can start investing. You can spend some money on advertising. I think the new generation, the internet generation, will be wanting to do these things. But if you let them come out and go into the system and be fed by the system again, then you'll have this waste. So we have to start somewhere.
Any other question we have? Or?
بحاجة إلى تشريع قوانين في مجلس النواب وكذلك من الحكومة. المشكلة في العراق هي كيفية إدارة الأموال. العراق غني وليس فقير. نحن لدينا اليوم بطالة وبطالة كبيرة، وهذا مشخص. وميزانية العراق هي أغلبها هي
عفوا اسمحي لي، ماكو وقت السؤال يعني
عفوا فقط أنا يعني الأخوان قوانين يعني ذكروا الأخوان مشكلة البورصة والاستثمار. يجب أن تكون هناك قوانين، لكن أنا أسأل هل تمت مفاتحة الحكومات العراقية والحكومة العراقية فيما يخص وزراء المالية استثمار عن يعني تشريع قوانين قد تكون لهذه الجهات رأي بها الخبراء.
The question is, has there been any discussions? And I think the answer is yes from all of us, right?
احنا ما نشتغل بالخلاء، يعني احنا نشتغل ويا قوانين هذه مشرعة. بعدين حطينا قوانين سنة 2008 طلع يا قانون كان هذا اللي كتبوه 65 56 ما ادري، كتبناه وجوي خبراء والحكومة الأمريكية كانت قاعدة، سوينا قانون اللي يسموه قانون كابيتال ماركتس، قانون الأسواق المالية بالعراق. هذا القانون 2008 كتب وراح لكم. احنا يا سنة
2018 19 21
انطونا اياه، بس انطونا نفسه يوم ما يفلسوه. هذا ما يصير، هذا ما يصير. يا ليش ما يصير؟ مو هنا العراق.
يعني اكو مشكله من ان يوصلني قانون ما فهمه، هذا زايد خليه قلبه. يعني بوقتها الكاستدي هذا زايد. شنو كاستدي؟ الكاستدي احنا القوانين يعني بما انه حضرتك موجوده فادعوك بصراحه وبامانه انه من نريد نسوي قانون او تعليمات تخص الكابيتال ماركت او تخص اي مؤسسه عراقيه اقتصاديه تعمل في العراق ان نعملها وفق المعايير الدوليه. ابسط واروع وافضل وتكاملا وكل التفاصيل اللي ممكن تجي كنتائج ايجابيه ان نجعلها تعمل وفق المعايير الدوليه.
Okay, sir.
شكرا.
Thank you very much.
شكرا.
I think I'd have to end it now. So I thank the panel. I think, and Shwan said, it's great that we have the first session. And thank you all for listening. And I thank the wonderful panel and gentlemen that I've had the pleasure to work with all the time. So thank you very much. And thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I see tolerance and freedom in Iraq. I wanted to thank this panel, and just to let you all know, on this panel, we have 3 individuals who are very involved in Iraq and in AUIS. The Euphrates Fund and Grant Felgenhauer do a scholarship at AUIS. Shwan Taha is on our board, and Ahmed Tabaqchali, as I mentioned at the start of the panel, is a fellow with AUIS and a professor at AUIS. And I think these 3 individuals, thank you all, are very good examples of giving back to Iraq and Iraqi youth and Iraqi higher education. So without further ado, if you are on the following panel, please come up to the stage. Mac, will you grab them? Just grab the people on the panel, thanks.